everyone. Welcome to Wine and Tea Wednesdays. I'm Mim Sims, CEO of Global Women for Wellbeing. We are delighted to have you with us today. And I hope everybody has a beverage and sit back and relax for an incredible conversation that we're going to have today. I am going to turn the conversation over to Deon Johnson, GW4W Advisory Board Member, the womanologist, author, and truly a champion for lifting up women. So delighted to be here with you, Deon.
Delighted as usual to be here with you, Mim, and as usual, thank you to you and the board for all that you do to provide this platform that's really touching women's lives and leadership all around the world. We're so grateful for you and all that you do. Well, it's another week, and welcome to all of our viewers, whether you're watching live right now or on the replay. We're really excited that you're here watching. We are here in service of you. We really care about you. We do this because of you. So thank you for joining us. And also, we don't really get a chance to chat during this interaction, but if you leave your comments, we really want you to leave your voice in the comment section. So tell us what you're thinking. Let us know your ahas as we talk about our topic today. Write them in the chat and we'll come back and revisit them after the broadcast. And we've got a really great conversation lined up today. Today we're talking about death, dying, mortality, and actually this is about living too. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this conversation. But before we do, let me introduce to you my co-host, Kate Nowlan, who is a strategic advisor for CIC. She's a health and wellness and fitness. CIC is a health and wellness and fitness firm organizing help around employee well-being. So welcome, Kate. We're really grateful to have you join us week after week. How are you?
Thank you, Deon. It's an absolute delight to be here, and I've known Sue for, we discussed today, nearly 20 years. So it's great to be having a conversation on this just incredibly important topic, which touches us all and all the viewers. So thank you for inviting me again, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, it's really, well, let's just dive right in. Our guest today is Sue Brayne, and it's going to be such a brilliant conversation. Sue's a therapist, an end-of-life researcher, she's a speaker, she's an author, and really her work is all about helping people to transform their relationship with mortality. She has an MA in the rhetoric and rituals of death, which I found really curious. So Sue, welcome to the broadcast. I really want to I want to just start by just hearing, where the hell did this fascination with death and dying and mortality come from? Explain yourself.
Okay, I'll explain myself. Really, it started very young. I guess I must have been around about 4 when I became conscious that this life was mortal. I was mortal, and that I was just passing through this life. And obviously, in those days, I didn't have anybody to go and talk to about it, but it sort of definitely shaped my life. There's no question about that. And I think it was probably prompted me to go and train as a nurse when I was 18. So I was laying out my first dead bodies at 18, as you do that when you train as a nurse. So death has always been just part of my life remit, really. I've always known at one point in my life, I'm not going to be here anymore. And it's always sat very well with me. It's never been frightening or alarming. It just fills me with curiosity. And my entire life journey has always been with that in mind. And now I'm kind of pushing 70 now, and so for me now,
good girl, looking good.
I've got a couple more years to go, but I'm pushing it. And I want to be conscious when I go. I want to live my death. So, and for me, talking about death and dying and consciousness makes me feel alive, and it gives me purpose and meaning. So it's just always been there. It's maybe I'm a bit weird with it, but that's just...
Well, maybe the word's not weird, but it is unusual, isn't it? Because death is often taboo in many communities. Yeah. It's a taboo subject, and often a subject that I know people really find difficult to talk about. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. I think in my experience of the research I've done for the books I've written, it isn't so much, it is a taboo subject, inverted commas. I always put it now in inverted commas. It's not so much we don't want to talk about it, is we don't know how to. And in my experience, open up the conversation about death and dying and then get the person to shut up. They're dying to tell their stories. And I think that's what I do. That is the work that I do, is provide a space for people to say what it is for them about their experience and their own relationship with death and dying, because everybody has a different relationship with death and dying, obviously. I was just running a death cafe the other day, and this woman came on and she was terrified. She actually admitted it. I've come because I'm terrified of dying. And by the end of the death cafe, she was like, oh, mate, this is really amazing. It completely changed her perspective, because everybody was signed up to talk about it from their own perspective and as a group. And it really supported her to actually go through the fear and then come out the other side.
Sue, can you tell us about the death cafes? Because I think many people won't know what you mean by death cafe.
Yeah. Okay, a very short history. They were set up by the wonderful man called John Underwood in 2011, and John was a Buddhist, and he wanted to create a different way of us relating to death and dying. So he began the whole death cafe movement, really, and he set up the first one with his mum, who's a psychotherapist in London, in September 2011. And then he set up the Death Cafe website. And since then, since that first Death Cafe, thousands have been run around the world. And what they really are, it's a beautiful structure. It's really simple. There's a facilitator, and it's a 2-hour come and talk about death and dying. And they just do what they say on the tin. That's what they do. It's about opening up this safe, confidential space to talk about end of life and death and dying in any way that anybody wants to do that. Some may be dying, some may be frightened of death, some may be sitting beside the death of, a much loved relative. It doesn't matter. Death is the subject that we talk about, and the conversations are fabulous. And every time I run one, I've run well over 100 now, I come away going, oh my goodness me, that was something else.
God, I can't even begin to imagine what people are speaking about. So can you tell us maybe something that you heard that would made you giggle? Or
a lot. Yeah, it really, some people, it's quite practical. It's about, when do I start clearing out my attic or the garage? Good idea. Before you go put your so you don't leave a mess behind. Other people, they want to talk about consciousness. What happens? What happens after we die? Some people talk about, I don't know, could be the possibility, do we come back here? Not necessarily, but that has happened in the past. People have talked about stuff like that. Some people talk about the dying process. Some people talk about end of life experiences, sitting beside the dying person, and suddenly this dying person is talking to somebody who's been dead for 30 years, or the pet dog that they had as a child. You never know. I never know what conversations are going to come, but they are so rich. And people come not knowing each other, obviously. It's a death cafe. And they go away and you can just feel everybody's hearts just bursting open. And they've met each other at such a profound level. And it is, there's no sort of, I don't know, chitty chat. This is just get in there and let's have a good chat about death and dying.
Wow.
Good. Oh, good.
To one.
And Sue, when you talk about death in a wider context, you speak about living each decade consciously. What does that mean? And is there any way, I'm thinking of our particular audience here, where you can apply that to women, kind of like living your each decade consciously, and thinking, it makes me think of my decades as a woman and how they, child, blah, 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 wife, mother, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I'm not so much about, I don't know, quite understand where the decade thing came in, to be honest with you, but because for my philosophy is live every day consciously. That's what we need to do. And I think as women, we're beginning to step up now. And, you know, it's the women that go to the workshops. It's women that come to the death cafes. I'm not decrying men. It's brilliant when they turn up, but not enough of them do. And it's the women who are sort of really making a stand in the world, saying we really want to make a difference now, and becoming more conscious and having meetings like this, which is just fantastic. So the women are natural gatherers. We naturally bring each other together. We naturally talk to each other. And I think that's what living consciously is all about. And for me, it's about, for me, living consciously is about learning to listen to ourselves. You know, what is our truth here? What really matters to us? And if I listen to myself, I can then make a better decision about where I go from here. And I also think it's about knowing that every action, every thought that we make has a profound consequence. And that's taking responsibility. Yeah. And the third thing is about kind of, I really believe women are ultimately, I think humanity is fantastically creative, but as women, when we live more consciously, I think we start really tapping into our creative uniqueness. That could be caring for somebody, it could be planting a garden, it could be running a company, but it's about, for me, it's writing. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's just really bringing out that beautiful creative energy that we all have. And gosh, this world needs it.
Yeah. What's interesting, because that it's mostly women showing up for these things. And I think it gets back to, correct me if I'm wrong here, does the research show that the primary caregivers at end of life tend to be women?
Yes, I think probably historically, because men traditionally died before women, and men tend to get older, or not older, sort of ill before the women do. But traditionally, yes, and a lot of older women now are caught in the sandwich generation. So they're caring for older mum and dad, and then they're also looking after the grandchildren because mum and dad have got to go to work. And that's causing a huge issue with a lot of women, and they're exhausted, actually, a lot of older women. And it's really interesting how many older women like that come into the death cafes. They just want the space just to talk about stuff like this. And women we talked together, where men are slightly more, you know, stand back, and it's more about performance. Certainly in my generation, I think the younger generation, the younger men that are coming up are fabulous.
Yeah,
that's not talking from my generation.
I think it's a really beautiful picture of seeing women coming, gathering and expressing themselves in this profoundly deep way, and being in the midst of other women expressing themselves in this deep way, and then becoming enriched and empowered by it to go back to their homes or back to their places of work and facilitate rich discussion like this. I think it's almost permission giving, isn't it, to
well, one of the most one of the women that has inspired me most is Claire Dubois, and she set up Tree Sisters because she had this profound vision given to her as she was in the middle of a car crash. Literally, the universe just told her, you will go and set up an organization called Tree Sisters and you will reforest the world. And that's what she does, and it had to be with the sisters.
Wow.
So, I mean, she is just so inspirational. And then there's Alexandra Pope, who set up the Red School because she wanted to educate women about their menstrual cycles and how powerful they were. And, you know, my generation, it was kind of like, it was called the curse. And, you know, and so these women are incredibly powerful women, and they're not sort of out there being in competition with men. Absolutely not. They're really coming from their place of creative genius as a woman. And I find this really exciting.
It's powerful stuff.
Well, you think about that in the context of a more sustainable world.
Yeah.
And I also love your analogy because you touched on it a little bit about the gardening or the growing. And I know that around, at least I know in Europe and the United States, I haven't seen research outside of that, is how much this past year has gotten so many people reconnected to their backyards, to their, gardens on a porch, or doing those things. And how that like the cycle of life, when you're digging in earth and you're watching things grow and die down for the winter and then come back.
Well, I think Gaia is female. That's Mother Earth, the grandmother, great grandmother. A lot of the indigenous tribes call her great grandmother, and that's female. And it's like Gaia, she needs us. She needs our healing as much as we need her healing. And this is the time of utter crisis at the moment. There's so much loss and bereavement and death and ending of cycles going on, and species going extinct. And Gaia is really calling to us to, we have to change now. We can't go on like we're going. And it is the women who are coming out to saying, okay, I am listening to that call. And again, I find that exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is exciting. I think what you are describing in your work around death and dying, what this is really pointing to is living.
Yeah.
This is really death and dying is the subject, but what it's really opening up is the and Mim's smiling because she knows that this is something we talk about a lot because it's a passion of hers. But it's really about how to live fully until the death and dying process.
Well, that's the book I wrote last year, and it's called Living Fully, Dying Consciously, because I passionately believe that when we really embrace our life, that's when we can take that in. George Bernard Shaw said, I live and die by what he said. He said, I want to be thoroughly used up when I die.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Let's with it. Even if it is traumatic, even if we are going through the shittiest time possible, we're still here, we're still alive for a finite time. Yeah. And maybe we can learn through, post-traumatic growth or whatever you want to call it. Maybe we can learn through that so we can actually take on board the life that we are here individually to experience. Yeah. My life is different to your, to the three of you on the screen. It's a different life, but it's life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sue, kind of jumping into another part of life. You've just had a book published, called Teddy is Going to Die, to help children and adults. And I think this is such an important subject. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I can. It's fresh off the press. It arrived half an hour ago.
Woo, look at that.
Wow. Please.
Fresh.
And it's dedicated to my grandson, Jack. And he wasn't quite 4 when he said this. And I was sitting there having lunch with him with his mum. And he suddenly, I swear to God, spoon to the mouth, suddenly said to him, to his mum and me, am I going to die one day? And Sally, his mum, went, over to you. So I kind of said, I sat down with him and just had this conversation with him and said, yes, that, everybody's going to die. And, yes, I'll die, you'll die. Everybody dies on this planet. And we had this kind of conversation. And then he was so cool with it. He went, oh, okay, that's fine. And carried on having lunch. And sort of, Mum and I kind of went, what? And I've spent 20 years talking to people adults about death and dying. Never, ever have I had that question thrown at me by a child. And it sort of sat with me. And I suddenly thought, I've got to do something about this because there's so few resources out there to sit down with a child and say, this is what it's about. Yeah. So this character called Granny Mo popped into my head. And I knew she was the voice, and I knew she was the character to do this. So I'm writing a whole series. So this is the first one, and Is Teddy Going to Die? Just deals with the main thing about death and dying and what it is. And the second book coming out is called Why Can't Mummy Wake Up? And that addresses right language about how to talk to a child using the kind of language, because that kind of language, you know, mummy's gone to sleep, is so confusing for them.
Yeah.
And lots of, because we're so bad at talking about death and dying, we haven't got a clue what to say to the kids.
Right.
And then there's another one addressing the death of a sibling in the family and the impact that that has on a family. And then the other one is addressing a sudden death of a grandparent in the family. And then, you know, there'll be more to come, but those are the main four, and they're all coming out this year.
So what do you say? What do you say to a child? That's really
You just talk really plain language to them. I think you have to go at their pace. They may just have a quick question, and they may be testing you out. You know, are you okay with this? I think you can only go as far as you're comfortable talking about death and dying. Certainly to say, oh, you shouldn't worry your little head about that, is very unhelpful, because that makes a child even more frightening. And I think if you can't find the words yourself, you know, talk to somebody else who can sit down with the child and talk to them about it. You have to feel comfortable. And also, there's a whole load of guidelines in the book, actually, to start the book, is, you know, what to do and how to do it, basically, in the book for the reader. And, you know, maybe the child doesn't want to carry on the conversation, but that doesn't mean to say they're not thinking about it. And in my experience, kids just come out with these questions because they're curious. They've heard the word, and they might be going, well, what does death mean? But they might not even know the meaning of it. So is Teddy going to die? Really? So you can sit down with the book, with a child, and it will answer those massive questions, help you to be there with the child doing that.
Yeah.
It brings
I
up
mean,
a
very
question
often,
for
sorry,
me.
Mia.
Yeah, just quick question about that. I'm curious if there's data for children that grow up with pets. I just know that as a child, we had fish and turtles and mice and hamsters. And so seriously, we had a pet cemetery. We really did in our backyard. And does it help to go through that process as a young child? Does it help with other people? And look.
You. Yes, of course it is, because they have, you know, that's often the first introduction for a child into death and dying, is actually a pet dying, and that needs to be handled well. And a lovely funeral, you know, you can do a beautiful funeral, and, you know, I mean, the language is the language. I mean, I don't use the language of going to heaven or anything remotely religious in the book, because you know, a lot of people aren't into that, but it's about making the child comfortable. And at the end of the book, there's a whole list of questions that you can go through the child with them, asking what their belief is. Have they thought about that? So the book really supports that too.
Yeah. You know, as I'm listening to you, I remember earlier on you said that you trained as a nurse, and that your first experience was to, you know, be with death and dying in that context. When can you remember your first time watching somebody pass over? And, you know, what I'm thinking that there might be some of our viewers who are just curious about what that moment's like. Can you share?
That's so interesting you say that, because on my website that gets over 1,000 hits a week, that particular question. That's the question most people want answers for. What does death look like? Because we've hidden death away. It's in hospitals and care homes and hospices, which are fantastic, but it's not at home anymore. So most people, I have people coming to the Death Cafe who are in their 70s who have never seen a dead body, and they're shamed by that. They never sat with anybody who's dying. So if anybody wants to, you know, I have a whole lot of information on my website. So if anybody wants more information about that, to go through that. For me, it was the most extraordinary experience, because 1 minute, this little old lady, she had life in her body, and the death rattle was happening, and I watched her do that. And the next minute, empty envelope, gone. But the room was full of, it felt like it smelled of flowers.
Wow.
She was the most beautiful woman, and I felt like she had a beautiful death, actually. And she just slipped away. I mean, some people don't slip away, but she did. And I'll never forget her. And she'd been the head mistress of one of the major girls' colleges in England. And she died at the Middlesex Hospital. Yeah, it was just awesome. And I knew I was in the presence of something extraordinary happening.
Yeah, I mean, I completely resonate with that. And my background is in health and nursing, and I have had the same experience of actually being shocked that beautiful and death and dying can be in the same sentence.
Oh yeah.
Mim's had that experience too. Like it is such it is something that we need to demystify. I really am so grateful for all that you shared today. It's been really, really powerful. I'm looking at the time when I'm thinking we say this every week.
This is just scratching, I think, and I think it's important to just recognize that it may be even more important to be doing this right now because of the pandemic, because of how front and center this has become for so many people. And
I think the pandemic has just slapped death in everybody's face. I mean, it's out there. The word death is there now. But it's how we respond to it and how we create a really healthy relationship. And I do mean healthy relationship with it now.
Absolutely.
That will change our world.
Yeah. I just hope that we don't try and stuff it back in that cupboard where it was. So
it's out of the box now.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, then the call is out that we are not going to let that happen.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Sue. It's been a fascinating conversation. If our viewers want to reach out to you, and you spoke about some resources that you have, how do they get in contact?
Just through my website, which is suebrayne.co.uk, and that's BRAYNE. So it's suebrayne.co.uk, and I've got lots and lots of resources about the whole dying process, and they can also order the book through the website as well.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, to our viewers watching, what a show. Let us know what you're thinking, what you're taking away, what your questions are, and we'll definitely come back and check those after the broadcast. And on another note, if you haven't already, please go to our website and download our white paper. The GW4W website is really navigate. And thanks so much, Mim.
Sure.
And if there's a topic that you'd like for us to cover on these broadcasts, then please let us know. Email us. We're a friendly bunch. We really want to hear from you, and we want to bring you content that's really enriching. And I've just realized that I didn't look to see who next week's guest is. Anybody remember?
Unfortunately, I don't know, because it's bright and early this morning. Unfortunately, we didn't do that, but I'm sure it's going to be
alive.
It'll be a surprise. So
it's going to be a great one, and they always are. These conversations are really, really enriching. I love taking part in them. So join us next week, same time, same place. And until then, remember, let's raise a glass and remember that great minds sit together.
Sit together.
Thank you.